Good evening, everyone. It is December 2nd, 2019. One more day done in December. And we are one step closer to finishing the Sony MDR-Z7 Mark II sound test. We have already completed the bass test some time ago. Yesterday, we completed the mids test, and today we are going to finalize the sound test by completing the treble response test. So far, what do I think? I think these headphones are fantastic. They sound really, really good. Are they worth the MSRP? No, I wouldn't say that. I think you can find them cheaper, and for about $500 or so, these headphones are worth a serious consideration. You may not think that Sony makes hi-fi headphones, audiophile quality headphones, but I would beg to differ with the Z7 Mark II that it does, in fact, provide a lot of substance. There's very good bass response, tight bass response given sufficient power. Even at lower power, it provides a rumble that's clean and undistorted. It provides clear mids. Not the clearest possible, but very, very clear. Good separation between the bass and the mids. Excellent detail retrieval from the mid section with multiple vocalists. And it has a way of just getting the mids coming out, despite the fact that in some songs, the mids might not be the first thing that you hear. They may not be the first 2 or 3 steps ahead of all the other instruments in a mix. They might be layered inside, between, like a sandwich. Turkey sandwich, perhaps. So today, we're going to the treble test. And the songs we have are Scherzo For X-Wings, Flight from the City, and New Light. We have once again plugged our headphones via balance cable into the Audio GD 1 amp. We are currently set at high gain at 110 volume set. And the Audio GD is being fed through the SMSL SU8, so balanced to balanced to balanced. And we're only doing the balance test because I want to have a real number. I don't know what the number rating is, or the volume rating is, or the power output is for the single-ended on the Audio GD. They just don't provide that information, so we're going with balanced. Okay, so let's start off with Scherzo For X-Wings. Here we go. At 110, it's pretty quiet, so I'm going to increase. I'm going to go to 125. And at 125, I can barely hear myself speak. You can hear it's still fairly quiet. There's a bit of energy in the horns and the brass instruments, but it's not quite there. We're going to have to ramp up the volume again. Let's go to 130. 130 now has a bit more energy in those instruments I just spoke of, the brass and the horns, but still not quite there yet. I'm going to increase again to 140. There we go. At 140, you finally get that energy behind those treble instruments. And there's definitely the energy, da-da-da-da-da, when it comes in like that right around 40 seconds of the song. The horns sound so grainy and realistic. There's this gruffness to horns when they're blow, and you could hear that in the right ear cup. Each individual group set is quite well separated. So it's not each individual instrument, but group set. So you have the horns, you have the percussion, you have the wind, you have everything else, right? You can hear individual group sets when they're all playing. Accent separation, stereo-like effect, left to right. You have some quieter instruments playing the left, further back, and you have more powerful instruments like the horns playing the right ear cup. No harshness, no peakiness, no ear piercingness, just clean energy from the treble. I could listen to 140 volume for probably, I don't know, a couple of hours at this. I wouldn't. It's not a good idea. Don't do that. But if you had to, you definitely could. Excellent response. Let's ramp it all the way back down to 120. And at 120, that energy kind of fades away. You don't get that full energy from the brass, the horns, and it becomes muted, a little blunted. Once you power these headphones, you give them that extra oomph, all of a sudden the driver just comes alive and you can feel that energy. So it's like having two different characteristics to this headphone, which is basically what I said for the bass response, I think, that if you have a low powered amplifier, you're going to get a softer sound signature. If you have a higher power amplifier, or if you can crank up the volume a lot more, you're going to end up getting a different sound signature, much more tight, much more precise. And if you do an A and B, if there's a way for you to do an A and B, you can hear the difference. Like, wow, there's not much energy in the treble response at the lower volume between, say, 110 to 130, 135 on the Audio GD. In that bracket of volume, it's a fairly easy listening type of sound character. Not harsh, not a lot of treble energy. It just sounds soothing and comforting, right? Smooth. You crank up the volume to 140, and all of a sudden, those instruments with the treble energy just come at you. But not in an aggressive way. They don't become ear-piercing. They don't become harsh. You just get the energy. And now you've got that great response. It's almost like you're sitting at the orchestra. You're, 2 or 3 rows from the stage. It's just like right in your face. That's the type of sound signature difference you're talking about, either being 2 to 3 rows away from the front of the stage or being somewhere in the middle of the audience in this big grand hall. You kind of get the idea. And that's the way that you have these two types of sound signatures, essentially, depending on the power output. Now, as far as 3D effect, width, depth, verticality, I'm not really hearing it on the Mark IIs. I don't think they really have that type of sound signature. They don't have that capability to provide you this 3D type of effect where it feels like your head is surrounded by the music, at least not for this song. And I can't say that it was anything like that for any of the other songs that we've tested. So far, in the various tests that we've done with the various songs that we've used, I have yet to experience a, quote, 3D-like effect with these headphones. But other than that, really interesting, very good treble response, clean, undistorted. Okay, so now let's go to Flight from the City. I currently have the volume at 120. I'm going to leave it at that, and let's go. At 120, the piano sounds really soft, gentle. There's a bit of soft, like I said, soft, but it's almost like somebody laid a thin sheet of, say, a bed cover or something on top of the piano, and just a tiny bit muffled, just a teeny tiny bit. I haven't heard the creaking of the bench yet. Maybe I've missed it, but there's a creaking of the bench as the pianist moves, and that happens fairly early. So let's go back to about 3 seconds. Let's listen for it. And I haven't heard it, and it should have happened by now. So let's keep going. I'm going to increase the volume to 130. 130 is a volume where I can still hear myself speaking, but it's a little bit more difficult to hear myself. Now you get that energy. There's this buzzing sound in the background layered deep down inside the song mix. You can hear that very clearly. The cello sounds so natural. It's this resonance. It's soft and soothing. No harshness. The piano sounds like you are standing maybe 15 feet away from this in a medium-sized room. It doesn't sound muffled anymore at the higher volume. It sounds fairly clear. The key pressed down where it thunk, thunk, typically what happens, you hear that thunk, thunk of the keys being pressed down. I'm not getting that thunk sound effect. It's not thick. It's just a slight tap, essentially, like dunk, dunk. Very hard to hear. And the detail of the seat, or the person sitting on the piano seat moving back and forth, that creaking noise, I still haven't heard it, and I should have heard it several times at this point. I'm going to increase the volume to 140. 140 is where, it's too loud for any song on this headphone. And now you get to hear that Now that driver comes alive. Now you can hear the thunk, thunk of the piano key being pressed down, and that creaking noise becomes sharp. You can immediately hear it. And the piano sounds so much more alive. It's got more energy now. Still no harshness. No harshness in the cello. No harshness with the piano. No harshness with the buzzing sound effect at the bottom layer. Yeah. At higher volume, it's consistent that the bass and the treble need that extra power. Now, often that means cranking up the volume. And with the Audio GD that has almost 10 watts of power available, and I think 16 ohms, 30 ohms, something like that, that's a lot of power. But even at, I think it was the last measurement was 300 or 600 ohms, something like that, you still get a good amount of power, almost a watt, I think, at that higher impedance. I'll have to go back and check. But the Audio GD is a powerful amplifier, really super powerful. And even that is I have to drive that louder and louder to get the Mark IIs to respond, to change the character. So you've got two different sonic characters again. At the lower volume, below 140, you get this softer approach. It's a little bit, teeny tiny bit muffled with the piano. The creaking noise at the bench is inaudible to me. The cello sounds super, super soft and soothing, and it's just such a soothing experience. Very smooth. You crank up the volume, you give these headphones more power, and all of a sudden, the details start coming out. They're sharp. The piano has more energy. The cello has more energy. The same thing happened with the bass. You can start hearing the thunk, 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 that kind of a bassy sound as the piano keys are being pressed down, wood on wood. That comes alive. That's a detail that was not present at the lower volume. And so, same thing with the bass response is happening here with the treble. More power results in a different sonic character. I'm going to decrease the volume back to 120. Okay, we're back to 120, and what I want to do at this point is go on to New Light by Kazuki. Now, if you watch or listen to my audio tests, you know this song very well. New Light has many, many layers of detail. So the first layer you should hear is the wind rustling through the dry grass and through the air. It's just a wind sound. You have kids playing in the background. Now they're supposed to be in a distance, somewhere behind you. A lot of headphones mute that sound. And so it just sounds either muffled or really quiet. And it doesn't have that kind of depth perception. It doesn't sound like they're behind you at a distance. It just sounds quieter. You should hear footsteps on the dry grass. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The first three are typically easily audible because the way that they're mastered, the way they're mixed in, it sounds like you're standing still and somebody right next to you starts walking, walks right next to you and walks in front of you a couple of feet. And so you hear that crunch, crunch, crunch. You have a piano, you have an acoustic guitar, you have a low synth sound that comes up around the middle of the song. All of those little details are what make this song so pleasurable to listen to, at least to me. It's an ambient song. And let's see how the Mark IIs perform. Okay, so here we go. We're at 120. I can hear the kids at 120, they just sound muted. So I think I'm going to have to increase the volume to 130. And at 130, that's a lot better. The kids don't sound muted anymore. They sound somewhere in the distance. So there is some depth perception sort of effect. I heard the footsteps initially. I clearly hear the wind rustling through the grass. Very clear. I can hear the piano. It has a lingering reverberation. Dun, dun. Very long decay. It's got some meat to it. So there's that. When I say meat, it goes dun. It just resonates. Seconds, not microseconds, seconds. And now you have that synth sound coming up. The synth sound is separate from the wind rustling. It's separate from the piano. You can hear the acoustic guitar now. It's also separate from the guitar. And as the synth sound comes up in volume, it's going to hit a crescendo right now. And I want to tell if it overpowers the guitar. It doesn't. The guitar is still audible, even though the synth has increased in volume beyond any of the other elements in the song. No harshness, no treble ear piercingness, no distortion that I could hear. So what happens with Bear Dynamic headphones, for example? Every one that I've tested, the 1770, the 1990, the T1 Mark II, is that they start distorting right around this portion of the song, and it sounds almost like somebody is blowing or talking into a fan that's running right in front of them, and it does this really weird sound effect that's very disturbing. The Mark IIs don't do that. I mean, I haven't heard any other headphone that does that other than the Bear Dynamics. The Mark II certainly don't do that. It's clear, undistorted. Let's keep playing for a few more seconds. Yeah, you could hear that synth sound with energy, but without any harshness. Still hear the piano and the guitar clearly, despite all that energy there, despite the higher volume in the synth. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We have a part 2 to this test for a new light. I have a gold standard, which is the Focal Clear. With that headphone, I can hear 16 footsteps from 0 seconds to 45 seconds. Crunch, crunch, crunch. And I count them out. The Clears have the gold standard, 16 within 45 seconds. I give other headphones up to a minute. I give them more time because I know that the Clear is something else entirely, a different ballpark altogether. We've done this test with the LCD-1 review so far. The LCD-1 depends on the day. It comes out between 4 and I think 6 footsteps that I can count within 1 minute of this song. Other headphones, the HD6XX came out with 8 footsteps from 0 to 1 minute. The Sundara came back with, I think, 11. I may be wrong, but somewhere around there. So very close to the HD6XX. Now let's see how the Mark IIs perform. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to restart this song. I'm going to leave it at 130. In fact, I'm going to increase to 135. We're at 135. And I'm going to count every time I hear a step. Crunch, crunch, crunch. So 1, 2, 3, things like that. I'm only going to count the steps I actually hear, not the ones I know should be there and I should be hearing. So if I don't hear them, I don't count them. Okay? 0 to 60 seconds. Here we go. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so I heard 8. So that's average. So the average amount of detail retrieval within 1 minute of this song. Again, the gold standard is 16 from the Focal Clear. We're half there, so that's why I call it average. It falls in directly in line with the HD6XX. It's similar to the Hi-Fi Man Sundara. It's superior to the LCD-1, which like I said, between I think 4 and 6. Let me double check. I have my notes here. Yeah, 6. That was the last time. That was with the HD6XX. I counted 6. And with the one just before that, that was 5 to 7, maybe 5 or 7. So we're very close. I would say that it's fairly close to the HD6XX, 650, very close to the Sundara, probably a little bit better than the LCD1, depending on the day, but again, very similar. Consequently, I think it's fair to say that the Z7 Mark II has the same type of detail retrieval as the LCD1, the Sennheiser, and the Hi-Fi Man in comparison. Okay, so let's talk about conclusions. What do I think? I'm fairly impressed with this headphone for, I think, 2 reasons. I'll give you the less important one first and then the more important one. The less important one is these are really comfortable headphones. And I haven't talked about comfort on these headphones, but they're very comfortable. They really do sit around my ears. And they cushion my head just perfectly. There's just the perfect amount of clamping force. Some people might find it too light, but for me, it's just right. It blocks out enough of the sound outside that I can just concentrate on the music. So there's just enough passive sound isolation that I don't have to worry about interference from noises around me. That's number one. Number two, the more important one, is that you get 2 different sound characters. Lower power, lower volume, you get a softer, smoother, more soothing, if you will, character. Add power, increase the volume, and all of a sudden the driver gets tighter. You get tighter bass response, you get more detail out of the driver, you start picking up more detail, you start getting more energy out of the treble instruments. But the mids remain the same. So we did this test yesterday with the mids. Lower volume, higher volume, the mids are essentially the same. The mids response doesn't change noticeably, at least to me, but the bass and the treble response definitely does. The detail response definitely does. So there is that. So if you're, I have yet to find a headphone that really does it in this way. And I'm sure there are other headphones out there that have the same type of response where you get 2 different sound characters, essentially. Now, this is true different sound character. It's not like gimmick, right? There are some headphone manufacturers like Beyerdynamic that claim that we have 2 different sound settings. With the 1990 and the 1770, you get 2 different sound settings because you get to change the ear pad. Well, big whoop-de-doo. Anybody can change ear pads to get different sound settings. It's not anything integral. It's not something specific to the headphone. Anyone can do it as long as it has replaceable ear pads. So don't pat yourself on the back just yet because you haven't accomplished anything. That's totally opposite of what the Sonys do, because there is, in fact, innately inside the driver, the way that it performs, you get 2 different sound signatures. Lower volume, less power, lower volume or less power, depending on what type of amplifier you have. You get a smooth sound signature. No harshness. You lose the detail, clearly, but it's a very relaxing sound signature. Give more power, increase the volume, you get a tighter response, more energy, better bass response, meaning tighter bass, the mids stay the same. So that's a true difference. That's a true sound signature. That's a true, quote, setting that you personally can play with. Now, depending on your amplifier, maybe you can find a happy medium. Instead of listening to it at 140 on the Audio GD, what if I listen to it at 133? Would that be just the happy medium? I don't know, right? It could be. But the fact that you can actually change depending on the power and volume level is, in my opinion, from my tests so far in the last year, when I've tested all these headphones and all this gear, I would say that's pretty unique. I have yet to come across, like I said, any other headphone that does it. So overall, I think that the Mark IIs are really interesting headphones. I'm a fan of Sony headphones. I like what they do. I think that they're hi-fi products. I mean, true hi-fi products, not the wireless headphones, not the cheap headphones that they make, but the Z7s, even the MDR 1A, A1, whatever it is. That one's really good, despite the fact that's a little bit muffled sound. I mean, the Z1s are tremendous. They're amazing headphones. So Sony does have a way of just making really good, smooth sounding, yet detailed headphones, minus the Z7 Mark I, which had some issues, and we'll talk about that one day. So if you're in the market and you're interested about the Z7 Mark II and you're just curious, hey, what is the sound signature? Well, you get two, essentially. That's my conclusion. I think you get two sound signatures. And it depends on your taste. Like if you want the soothing sound signature, you can definitely have that with the lower powered amplifier or lower volume. If you want a more tight response, more energy out of the treble, then you'll need more volume and or you'll need a higher output amplifier. But that's up to you. I hope that this has been of some help. If you've been considering this headphone and really thinking about it, you find a good deal under MSRP. I wouldn't pay MSRP for this headphone. I don't think it's worth that at all. Very few headphones are, in my opinion. But if you find it for a price that you think is justified to you, and you were just looking for more information about the sound signature, I hope this test was helpful in that regard. If you find these reviews helpful, if you find any of my videos or my content helpful, I would ask that you might just consider donating to me a couple of bucks a month on Patreon. For the price of a cup of coffee from Starbucks, a mediocre cup of coffee from Starbucks, by the way, once per month, you could help me save up more money so that I can buy new and old gear that I can review thoroughly for you. And I love doing this stuff. This is not my full-time job. This is a hobby of mine that I know it brings me a lot of pleasure. I don't know if it brings you any pleasure, entertaining at all to you. But if it is, hey, maybe you may want to think about throwing me a couple bucks a month just to keep this going. If you have a particular review that you want me to do, there's a product review form in the description section. Click on it. Hey, make sure you ask me to do a review of a product I currently own. If you ask me to do a if you ask me to do a review of a product I don't own, that's gonna be problematic because then I won't be able to do it until I actually get that product, and I may or may not get that product. It all depends on my personal preference. So go ahead and click on the request form. There's a link in that request form to the products I currently have. There's a list. Look at it and then submit the request. I'll get to it as soon as I can. I'm tremendously backlogged. If you like this content but you haven't subscribed, hey, consider subscribing. I am well over 900 now. I'm at 901 or 902 subscribers, which is fantastic. We still got 30 days left in this month, 29 days. We have 29 days left in this month, and I want to know if we could go a little bit higher. It would be great if we could get closer to the 950 mark. That would be really fantastic. I hope that all of you have a wonderful, amazing rest of your day and a great end to your week. It's going to be 4 days away, but still. And that you enjoy what is left of 2019. It's almost over, and hopefully we can all begin 2020 a little bit better. Take care.